Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I've always been an animal lover. I love all kinds of critters, cows, chickens, pigs, you name it. But dogs always held a special place in my heart. When I moved to the city for work, I made sure to adopt a rescue pup to keep me company. My job kept me cooped up inside most days, so I made it a point to take long walks with my furry friend every evening. It was our special time together, a chance to unwind and enjoy the fresh air. One particular evening started like any other. We set out on our usual route, my dog trotting happily beside me. But as we turned a corner, I saw something that made my blood run cold. There, in the middle of the street, was a small dog. Calling it a dog seemed almost wrong. It looked more like a trembling skeleton covered in matted fur. Its eye was swollen shut, oozing pus. Its nails were so long it could barely walk. My heart broke seeing this poor creature suffering. I quickly called my wife. I urgently explained the situation, asking her to bring a blanket and come pick us up because there was a dog in terrible shape. While waiting, I heard a door open nearby. An older man shuffled out, looking like he just rolled out of bed. He called out to the dog, trying to get it to come inside. This neglectful monster was the dog's owner? I asked him if it was his dog. He confirmed it was, sounding annoyed at my question. I demanded to know why the dog was in such awful condition. His response was dismissive, claiming the dog was sick and refusing to eat. That's when I lost it. I yelled at him, making it clear there was no way I was letting this poor creature go back to that hellhole. I told him this was abuse and he couldn't take the dog back. The old man got defensive, telling me to mind my own business and insisting the dog was his property. We went back and forth shouting at each other. Some neighbors came out to see what the commotion was about. Later they told me he had another dog inside too. Finally my wife pulled up. I scooped up the trembling pup, wrapped her in the blanket, and we headed home. We decided to call her Sally. I gave her a gentle bath and bought some wet food, which she devoured hungrily. We set up a cozy spot for her in the garage for the night. The next morning I took Sally to the no-kill shelter and reported the incident to animal control. They investigated and ended up rescuing the other dog from that house too. Sadly, Sally was in such bad shape that she had to be put down. It broke my heart, but at least her suffering was over. That's when I decided the old man needed to pay for what he'd done. His house was on our regular walking route. My dog always took a dump a couple houses before we got there. It was the perfect opportunity for some payback. I started tossing the bags of dog poop onto his roof every single day. At first, he'd climb up to clean it off, but eventually, he gave up. His roof became a stinking monument to his cruelty. I also made flyers with his address and pictures of Sally's condition, distributing them to all the neighbors. I wanted everyone to know what kind of monster lived among them. Even after I moved across town, I'd make special trips every few months to add to his rooftop collection. It was my way of making sure he never forgot what he'd done to that poor, innocent dog. Some might say I went too far. But every time I pictured Sally's frightened eyes and trembling body, I knew he deserved worse. Maybe next time he'd think twice before mistreating an animal. One day, I decided to take my 6-month-old daughter to the park for some fresh air. As a single dad, I cherished these moments with her. We had a great time at the park and I was feeling pretty good as we headed back to the car. That's when things took a turn for the worse. As I approached my car, I noticed another vehicle had parked so close to mine that I couldn't open the driver's side door. I sighed, knowing I'd have to squeeze through the passenger side with the baby. But as I got closer, I realized the other car was actually blocking me in completely. I looked around, hoping to find the owner, and that's when I saw her. A middle-aged woman with a short blonde haircut, tapping away on her phone, completely oblivious to the world around her. I politely asked the woman if the car blocking mine was hers. She looked up, clearly annoyed at being interrupted, and confirmed it was her car. When I explained that she had blocked me in and asked if she could move it, she dismissively told me she was busy and asked if I could wait. Taken aback by her attitude, I tried to explain that I needed to get my baby home and that it would only take a minute for her to move her car. She rudely repeated that she was busy and insisted I could wait. Getting frustrated, I tried to reason with her, saying I didn't want to argue and just needed to leave. I pleaded with her again, emphasizing it would only take a moment. The woman rolled her eyes and got out of her car. I thought she was finally going to move, but to my surprise, she started walking towards the store. When I called out to ask where she was going, she casually replied that she had shopping to do. I tried to explain that she couldn't just leave me blocked in, especially with a baby. This seemed to anger her, and she turned around, her face red. She rudely told me off, saying she didn't care about my baby and that as a paying customer, she could park wherever she wanted. Shocked by her entitlement and rudeness, I tried one last time to explain that she couldn't just block people in and asked her again to move her car. She stormed back to her vehicle, and for a moment I thought she'd finally seen reason. But as she got in and started the engine, I realized I was wrong. The woman began backing up and I thought she was going to leave. Instead, she suddenly accelerated forward, straight towards me and the stroller. I barely had time to react. I pushed the stroller out of the way, but I wasn't fast enough to dodge completely. The car hit me, knocking me to the ground. I heard my daughter start crying. Pain shot through my leg, but adrenaline took over. I saw red. This woman had just tried to run over me and my baby. Something in me snapped. I limped to her car door, yanked it open, and dragged her out. She was screaming and trying to hit me, but I was beyond caring. I started swinging, landing punch after punch. The woman cried out for help while I yelled at her, accusing her of trying to run over a baby and calling her insane. I don't know how long it lasted, but eventually, I felt someone pulling me off her. It was a security guard from the store. He demanded to know what was going on. I quickly explained that the woman had blocked me in, refused to move, and then tried to run over me and my baby. The woman, now sobbing with a bruised and bloody face, accused me of lying and claimed I had attacked her for no reason. But by this time, a crowd had gathered. Several people had seen what happened and backed up my story. The police were called, and the woman was arrested for assault with a deadly weapon and attempted murder. As the adrenaline wore off, the pain in my leg got worse. The paramedics said it was likely broken. My daughter, thankfully, was unharmed, just scared and crying. I ended up spending the night in the hospital, my daughter staying with my sister. The woman was charged and eventually convicted. Last I heard, she was serving a long prison sentence. It wasn't how I expected my day at the park to end, but I learned something important. Always stand up for yourself and your loved ones, even if it means taking on an entitled person who thinks the world revolves around them. After bouncing around different jobs for a few years after high school, I finally found my calling in healthcare. It wasn't easy. I had to go back to school, juggle part-time work, and deal with the stress of exams. But now, 5 years into my job as a medical assistant at a busy clinic, I can honestly say it was worth it. Most days I love my job. Helping patients, working with a great team, and constantly learning new things keeps me engaged. But then there are days like yesterday that make me question everything. It started as a normal afternoon. I was at the front desk, checking in patients and managing appointments. That's when they walked in, a couple I recognized from the day before. The husband had come in for some routine blood work, and now they were back for a follow-up appointment. As soon as they approached the desk, I could tell something was off. The wife's face was pinched with anger, and the husband looked like a storm cloud about to burst. The wife immediately demanded to know where her husband's test results were, claiming they were told they'd be ready by now. I calmly explained that I would check on that for them, mentioning that some results come back quickly, while others can take a few days to process. The husband reacted angrily, insisting that waiting a few days was unacceptable and that he needed the results right away. I tried to explain the situation calmly, but they weren't having it. The husband's face turned red as he started yelling. He arrogantly asked if I knew who he was, demanding to see all the results immediately and expressing outrage at being made to wait. His wife chimed in, calling the situation ridiculous and questioning the competence of our clinic. By this point, other patients in the waiting room were staring. I could feel my cheeks burning with embarrassment, but I kept my voice steady. I attempted to reassure them that I understood their frustration, but explained that we were processing the results as quickly as possible. I informed them that some tests simply take longer due to the nature of the analysis required. The husband, however, refused to listen to what he called my excuses. He threatened to call the police if we didn't get him the results immediately. I thought he was bluffing, but to my shock, he whipped out his phone and dialed 911. He ranted to the dispatcher about how we were withholding his medical information and endangering his health. While we waited for the police to arrive, I called my manager to handle the situation. She came out and tried to reason with the couple, but they were beyond listening. When the officer showed up, I felt a wave of relief. Surely now this madness would end. But I was in for another surprise. My manager started explaining the situation to the officer, but he interrupted her. The officer insisted on hearing from the patient directly, stating he couldn't just take her word for it. I watched as the officer spent the next 20 minutes listening to the husband's wild accusations. Finally, after confirming that no laws had been broken and everyone was safe, the officer left. Just when I thought it was over, the husband raised another complaint. He expressed anger that a nurse had called him about his other results instead of the doctor. I explained that our nurses are highly trained professionals who often handle routine result notifications, and that the doctor reviews all results and would personally call if there were any concerns. The wife retorted that this wasn't good enough, arguing that they pay good money to see a doctor, not to be pawned off on some nurse. At this point, my patience was wearing thin. I took a deep breath and decided to try one last time to reason with them. I acknowledged their upset feelings but emphasized that our entire team works hard to provide the best care possible. I informed them that the remaining test results would be ready in a few days, and that they'd be notified as soon as they were available. I then asked if there was anything else I could help them with. The couple glared at me, then stormed out of the clinic, yelling about filing complaints and finding a new doctor. As I watched them leave, I wished there was some kind of consequence for people who behave like this. Wasting police resources, verbally abusing healthcare workers, and disrupting an entire clinic over perfectly normal procedures seemed like it should be punishable somehow. Later that week, I found out there was a silver lining to this whole debacle. Apparently, the husband's tantrum had been caught on our security cameras. My manager, fed up with their behavior, sent the footage to their insurance company along with a detailed report of the incident. A few days later, we received word that the insurance company had decided to drop them as patients due to their disruptive behavior. They would now have to find a new clinic and potentially pay higher rates elsewhere. Maybe next time they'll think twice before treating healthcare workers like punching bags. My wife and I had been struggling financially for months. We'd both lost our jobs due to company downsizing, and finding new employment in our small town was proving difficult. Every penny counted, which is why we found ourselves at Walmart that day, desperately trying to stretch our budget. As we stood in the dairy aisle, I was frustrated looking at the prices. Butter, something we used to buy without a second thought, had become a luxury item. My wife and I were having a hushed but heated discussion about whether we could justify the expense when we heard a commotion further down the aisle. Curiosity got the better of us. We'd heard stories about entitled customers causing scenes in stores, and part of me wondered if we were about to witness one of those infamous Karen moments. Using all our stealth, which admittedly wasn't much, we pretended to be deeply interested in cottage cheese while inching closer to the source of the disturbance. As we got closer, I heard a man's voice shouting that he didn't work there. Now, this piqued my interest even more. I expected to see him facing off against some demanding customer, but what I saw instead caught me off guard. The man was tall, easily over 6 feet, and he was glaring down at a tiny woman who couldn't have been more than 5 feet tall. She looked bewildered as she responded to his outburst. The woman calmly explained that she understood he didn't work there, but had hoped he might help her reach the milk. She added that it was fine if he couldn't help. Instead of showing any compassion or understanding, the man doubled down. He demanded to know why she thought he worked there, repeating that he didn't work at the store. The poor woman looked mortified. She quickly apologized for upsetting him and then, to my amazement, started to climb the dairy case herself. I was about to step in and offer help when a Walmart employee hurried over and grabbed the milk for her. But the tall man wasn't done. He actually had the audacity to demand that the employee confirm he didn't work there. The employee, bless him, handled it with more patience than I could have mustered. He calmly explained that no one was saying the man worked there and suggested that the woman had probably just asked for help because of his height. The tall man stubbornly insisted that he didn't have to help because he didn't work there. The employee agreed with him and quickly excused himself, clearly wanting to escape the awkward situation. The woman thanked the employee and started to walk away, but the tall man was still fuming. I half expected him to keep yelling, but instead, he stormed off in a huff. On one hand, I was disappointed that no manager had been called to witness this ridiculous behavior. On the other hand, I was impressed by how the employee and the woman handled the situation with grace. We finished our shopping, the butter debate momentarily forgotten in light of what we just witnessed. On the drive home, my wife and I couldn't stop talking about it. My wife couldn't believe the man's behavior, noting that all the woman wanted was a little help. I agreed, pointing out how quick and easy it would have been for him to grab the milk. My wife then observed that some people just seemed to want to be angry. Her words stuck with me. Here we were struggling to make ends meet, and yet we still would have helped that woman if we'd been close enough. It made me realize that no matter how tough things get, kindness doesn't cost a thing. When we got home, I immediately went online, half expecting to see a post from the tall man, twisting the story to make himself look like the victim. But there was nothing, so I decided to share what I'd seen myself. As I typed up the encounter, I couldn't help but add a little postscript. I addressed the tall guy at Walmart, hoping he'd realize how ridiculous he looked and reminding him that kindness costs nothing. I also left a message for the short lady, apologizing for what she had to deal with and offering that next time she could ask me or my wife for help instead. I hit post and sat back, feeling a strange mix of satisfaction and sadness. It wasn't the dramatic confrontation I'd expected to witness, but it was a stark reminder that sometimes the most entitled people aren't the ones making a scene, but the ones refusing to show basic human decency. As for the butter, we decided to splurge this once. After all, life's too short to always pinch pennies, and sometimes you need a little comfort food to restore your faith in humanity. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.